see, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 advisory members, so I believe we do have a quorum. So can I get a motion to open the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we'll take a vote. Jane? Brendan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Wasim?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye, so the meeting is hereby called to order at 7:01 p.m. This is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. I will actually probably wait for a few people to trickle in, just because I don't want to start discussions with only 2/3 of advisory here. I do know that Dan Sickle is not going to be here. But then let's see, otherwise we're just waiting for Natalie and Steve Leahy, right? But I will begin with the reading of the agenda. And actually it looks like Natalie Weir is joining us now. So first we have addition of topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. I have no items to add. Does anybody else from advisory have anything they want to add?
No.
All right, hearing none, then we will have liaison reports, followed by fiscal year 2023 budget discussions on the Council on Aging, Elder Housing, Town Forest, Conservation, and the Assessor's Office. And then we will go over the previous meeting minutes, and then that will be it. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the agenda? All right, and can I get a volunteer to take minutes for tonight's meeting? Great, Wasim, thank you. And Steve Leahy is joining the meeting now. So we have everybody that we expect from advisory. All right, so I guess let's start with liaison reports. Does anybody have any liaison reports?
Yeah, so Steve, this is Mark. This may be a good time just to follow up on an agenda item that we talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
There's a subgroup of us, well, Dan and I, that have been meeting with Deb and with Heidi, just trying to work on some various, finance things, trying to push some initiatives forward. And one of the things that we talked about a couple weeks ago was possibly establishing a capital stabilization fund. We don't have one right now. Other towns seem to, it's best practice. So we put together just a really quick summary of the pros and cons as we saw it as a subcommittee, as to, whether moving this warrant forward and voting on it at a town meeting to establish was a good idea. So obviously, in our opinion, the pros outweigh the cons. This is just a document that I'll send this out to the rest of advisory, but this is just meant to educate all of us in the group, about why we think it's a good idea. We can certainly, I can send this out, we can all read over it, and we can talk about it as time goes on. But to me, it seems like kind of a slam dunk. I mean, we're basically setting aside, right now we're at like 8 or 9% of free cash as a percentage of our annual budget. And I think the best practice is somewhere in the 3 to 5% range. So taking some of that free cash and actually putting it, stockpiling it away for capital items, small capital items that we don't want to finance, seems like just a no-brainer and a really good idea. But others may have different ideas that we're missing or not considering. So that's sort of it. I don't know if anyone else, I don't even know if Heidi or Deb is on tonight and if they want to add anything or if anyone else has any comments.
Yeah, I think Heidi and Deb are both on here. First quick,
Oh, go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
that's right. No, I just, first quick kind of logistical question is, Heidi and Deb, do you know, is this on the warrant as a placeholder now?
Yes, it is.
Great. No, that's all. Go ahead, Peter.
The 8 to 9% right now of free cash, is that an estimate or is that certified?
It is not yet certified. I talked to our consultant who then contacted DLS and they have it and they're reviewing it. She thought maybe by this week, but I haven't heard anything this week. So I would imagine by next week, we should have something. And we're looking at 2.4 million is what the number was that was submitted.
Yes, so that's music to my ears. Now, can we invade our program that number so that at the end of the fiscal year in July, August, September, knowing that the year isn't closed yet, have Vadar calculate that number?
Vadar can't really calculate it, but if I'm able to close the books sooner, like in, September, October, then we can do a calculation. And, that's my goal.
And not to rush you, I don't mean to.
No, I mean,
There's nothing
November
very
1st would be
fast.
ideal, to have a number by then. What happened to us, we actually submitted it for certification. I think it was back maybe the end of November, 1st of December, and everybody was getting their tax rates certified. So the DLS, it goes to the back of the, the back of the pack until everybody's tax rates are, calculated and certified and everything else like that. So we kind of missed that window. So next year, if we can get within that window, then it will be certified a lot sooner, which is the goal.
And that's great, because the earlier we can certify that, the better we can plan. And I know it's just a skeleton, the Capital Stabilization Fund, but I believe it should mirror the rainy day funds where it maintains a pool of money that we can dip into and then bring back up to fund other things, because we have to, my humble opinion, have to have very specific parameters on how to fund, what the balance and how to use this fund is, which again is the process of crafting the warrant articles that would enable this fund.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Any
as
other-
we use those funds for various things over the years, and as we certify free cash, or at least know what the number is going to be for the next year, we can always, then allocate and get it back to exactly where we want it each year.
Right, and those on advisory know that it's closer to the town meeting that we decide the means to finance certain items on the warrants. And this would allow us, and I'm all for the fund, further out from the town meeting to determine what means of financing versus exempt overrides or free cash. And usually those are the two sticks that we have to beat the drum of financing for these items.
So as far as funding this goes, each year it would be sort of like in the use of free cash article, we would say how much we want to put into this.
Yes, so depending on where the free cash sets, a good rule of thumb is that we'd always want to maintain 3 to 5% of free cash so that we don't spend it, that rolls over to the next year, and we're always maintaining that 3 to 5. But anything extra over that, like we're going to be a good 3% over, we can use to pay unpaid bills, snow and ice, which we usually do, OPEB. This year, I think we're gonna have, you know, a couple $100,000 maybe that we could put to starting stabilization and maybe even still pay a few small capital expenses right off the bat.
And then we would vote on the capital items the same way we normally would. It would just be a line item and the town would still vote if we're getting a new fire truck or whatever.
Right, right. It would
But I
give us a
presume-
different,
I presume, Heidi, then in that same year, though, the town meeting vote would have to be to use money out of the capital stabilization fund for a particular purchase, right? Like, let's say it was a police cruiser and it was $70,000. In that actual capital item, we would have to specify that it was being paid for out of the capital stabilization fund. Is that right?
correct. It gives you a third vehicle of where to fund. Instead of free
Okay.
cash, you will have this as well. But when you're allocating to what to use from free cash, you could allocate to this capital stabilizations fund, just like you do right now to the general stabilization fund. You know, and we are kind of getting close to where this year we'll finish off the last amount to make up the trees. And then I think our general stabilization fund should be just maintained at an amount that will keep it to reaching 3%, and just maintain that and not exceed it, so that anything extra we can start building up over the next couple of years into this fund.
Great. Steve Leahy, you had something.
Yeah, thank you. So to be clear, and maybe I missed this at the beginning, so this capital stabilization fund is separate from the other stabilization fund, or this is one and the same?
Separate. So we have a general stabilization fund, which is our
Yep.
rainy day fund for emergencies. This would be specific for capital purchases, such as the smaller ones that are, less than 5 years usage, that are, under 100,000, that it may not make sense to bond as the interest rates go up. If we slowly start adding to this fund, my goal is within 8 to 10 years, this becomes a good place for pay as you go, is instead of borrowing on a lot of those items.
Okay, so it'd be funding a stabilization fund and a capital stabilization fund. I would note
Correct.
that because we seem to be flush with cash this year, or free cash this year, we'd be able to put a chunk in now. But no, I would just want to note that there'll be other years, maybe even in the near future, where we just don't have money to put into it. And it would have to be okay that there will be some years that we don't fund the capital stabilization, maybe in truth, right? If we're taken out from it, then we don't need to be putting in. Are there any restrictions? I remember with some of the, I forget if it's free cash or stabilization, Heidi, you've made note in the past that if we don't keep a cadence of funding it regularly, it actually somehow looks bad to some of the analysts in our ratings.
Right,
Am I
that was our
recalling that correctly?
No, that was our general stabilization fund.
Yep.
So which counts as reserves. This will also help count towards our reserves. So our general stabilization account should reach a certain level, and we should maintain that one.
Okay.
This one should be when we get the extras, something comes in, maybe even overlay. If we get money back from overlay release, that money from overlay could go into the capital stabilization fund. And one of the biggest differences is right now with free cash, sometimes we know that's not money that's in the bank due to all kinds of timing issues and when we spend it. This is money we're actually going to physically have and know what's in the bank. We're going to have a bank account. It's going to be here. We're going to know this is it, and it's going to hopefully be getting earnings.
Okay, and one last question on this. Ever since I got on advisory many moons ago, Dover's always had a stash of cash that we have been envious of, or certainly I'm envious of. Is a capital stabilization fund how Dover has funded their, and how they hold their excess funds? Do you know?
Dover does not have a capital stabilization fund. Dover has about 9 million free cash. So it's sitting in different bank accounts for whatever reason they have. And I believe in there, that's one of the things that they're supposed to look at too, to encourage to have a reserve fund.
Okay.
I read a report today, Sudbury, the DLS did a report on the town of Sudbury in 2020. And it was a review of capital improvement program. And it was excellent. It was very similar because Sudbury was similar to us, where they were using mainly excluded debt or free cash to fund items. And the DLS really saying best practices is to have a capital stabilization fund They're also recommending getting away from excluded debt, but trying to put things in the debt level. I won't go into it in this meeting, but I can go into it more and I can send out that report too. It was really very good.
Okay, no, you've answered my questions. Thank you very much.
If you could send
Great.
me that report, Heidi, I'd appreciate it, because I think that was one of my suggestions last meeting, was to find a town that was comparable, and you succeeded. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thanks. I would propose that we table this for now, just because this is a liaison report, and I think it seems like where there's general support from advisory for this, so it'll probably be a warrant article, and so then we will we can discuss it at length when it's an agenda item. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. All right. Any other liaison reports?
Update on the schools, Steve.
Yep.
There was a regional school committee meeting last night at which there was a report by the Director of Student Services, and that's the position to which the SPED program, the guidance program, and the school nurse report. And she outlined a plan, a very aggressive plan, I would call it, to add 8.5 new positions. Now, that's not just at the region, that's all 3 schools combined, or 4 schools combined. One of those is at Chickering, so it doesn't affect us. The other 7.5, 4.5 of them would be at the region. And 3 of them would be at the elementary level, presumably shared. So I don't know if it would be split 50-50. But interestingly, not all of these were even listed in the version 1 of the school budget that came out in December. So there were some additions, you know, over and above what had been put in their original budget. And my understanding is that the original budget is a high watermark for them, that they can't go over that amount. Now, Don was suggesting that there could be some retirements that could potentially fund these additional positions, but you know, the bottom line is that there's 8.5 or 7.5, not counting Chickering. I'll call them new positions. 4 of them were piloted in FY22 and were paid for through various means. A couple of them were paid for with retirement, saved retirement funds from teachers who retired last year. But it's obviously, you know, a significant increase in staffing that they're looking for. There was not much pushback from the school committee last night. There was a request for more data to support the request, but that was about it. So, you know, we're looking at the school budget was already upwards of 4%. Both Sherborn, I believe, and the region were upwards of 4% increases from last year. And this would put that, you know, beyond that as well, presumably. So, you know, it's an additional, it's quite a bit of additional staffing. You know, the version 2 of their budget, at least the region's budget, is supposed to be presented on February 1st. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what they do in version 2. But, you know, it's kind of a bit of a red flag for me, given, you know, how many new positions were outlined there.
Jane, I missed the purpose of those new positions.
It runs the gamut. There's a new high needs special educator who would be at the middle school. There's a new elementary school counselor, a new middle school counselor, a new high school counselor. They're converting, and I'm not counting this because, as I understand it, it's just a conversion of someone who's working with the Bridge program currently would become a full-time teacher. There'd be a math specialist, a new social emotional learning specialist, a new middle school academic specialist, and then a new floating nurse that would be district-wide.
Because we were convinced in previous years of the need and the appropriateness to mainstream out of district students that could be educated in district if we made the investment and there was a return on investment by educating them within. And if this is a continuation of that, that's great, because those out of district costs were pretty high compared to salaries, wages, and benefits of an additional person, as you may recall. If it's a response to COVID, I'd be interested in that, because that's the pandemic du jour, and that may not last forever.
Yeah, I mean, none of them were in response to COVID, interestingly enough. Even the additional school nurse, they specifically said was not a request that was in response to COVID. Now, you know, some of the behavioral and social emotional stuff that's going on may be indirectly related to COVID, and I don't know whether that opens the door to use some of their COVID relief funds for some of these positions. But, you know, that doesn't last forever, right? That's just kind of a temporary fix, maybe for the next year or two, if they were to go that route. In terms of whether this would be a return on investment with respect to out of district, that was a question that one of the school committee members asked. There was a request that for part of, you know, the additional data that they were requesting, that there be some indication of whether, you know, this was in part being requested to basically get a better return on investment from OOD versus in district. So that is an open question that the school committee did ask for more information on.
Thank you.
And do you know, Jane, you said that 4 of the positions were already being 4.5 were being piloted in 22. Does that essentially mean that they've been hired and they're working right now, and essentially they're just asking to put them into the regular budget moving forward? It isn't that these are positions that, at least of those 4, it's not like they're open positions that haven't been filled, like there's actually people already doing the jobs.
I think that is true with respect to those 4. I think that I think with respect to at least 2 of them, that didn't necessarily show up in the budget per se last year, because it was covered by unanticipated retirement savings. So you could view it as, you know, potentially a net gain this year if they don't have the retirement savings to cover it again this year. There were only 2.5 at the region anyway. There were only 2.5 new positions that I believe that were outlined in version 1 of the budget. There was also there was extra money put into the budget for nurse substitutes in version 1 of the budget. So presumably if they hire a new full-time nurse, they would not need the extra money for the nurse substitutes. So that would be, you know, a bit of a balancing there. But there was acknowledgement that version 1 of their budget did not cover all of these positions, that there were some additional asks being made at this point over and above version 1 of the budget, and that potentially they could be covered by some retirement savings if that comes along.
All right, I think probably we need to maybe have a discussion with Dawn offline to kind of figure out the ramifications for the budget, and to see if she thinks that she can find other ways to pay for these positions, or at least offset them by reducing other things in the budget, as opposed to just taking the full hit. And, you know, obviously I think we need to also, like the RSC, kind of await the additional information and data to back up this request. But in the meantime, I think it's reasonable to try to approach Dawn and see what she thinks about finding other ways to offset it. Does that sound like a decent strategy?
Yes, with their retirements, they can free up a lot of salary tranches to hire new people. And from memory, there were a number of people approaching retirement.
And to Steve's point earlier, it seems like they've been able to fund, they're somehow funding these positions at the moment seemingly, but again, let's get that from Don.
So Steve and Jane, how would you guys feel about having a conversation offline with Dawn? I can also contact her, but you guys, I'm assuming, have probably had more of a working relationship with her the past couple of years. But it's up to you guys.
Hey, Steve, if you're good with that, I'm good with that.
Yeah. Great. All right. Anything else on the schools? All right. Any other liaison reports? Steve, is your
Yes,
hand just still up from earlier?
Sorry, yeah, how do I get that down? I'll find a way to get it down somehow, somewhere.
I can lower it for you.
So
I
Steve,
have all the power. Yes, go ahead.
Natalie and I had a chat with Chris Owens from the planning board.
Okay.
Budget mostly, probably, I don't want to take anyone's time to talk about all the stuff we discussed during the call with Chris. Most of the stuff is very trivial. There was a move of one position, sustainability coordinator, from the select board budget to the planning board budget, and this was apparently by request from the town administrator and the select board. Otherwise, nothing in terms of the budget. There is potentially something big on the warrant article side of things. This is related to Complete Streets, a project that may take more than the 400K grant that I guess we get per year from Complete Streets. But this is a warrant article, so I don't know if this is the time to speak about it, or maybe we'll leave it until actually Chris has a little more, and Chris and the planning board have more information about it. But that's potentially a request that's going to be put forward to the town to approve spending, because if that next Complete Street project was to proceed, it's going to be well more than the 400K grant. So there will be some spending on the part of the town. So that's probably the only thing that I want to bring up out of this conversation. Everything else is, I think, not much impact or no impact to the budget.
Okay, I think if that's definitely going to be a warrant article, we can just we'll cover that in a later meeting when we're talking about it as a warrant article.
Okay.
All right.
And that's about it.
Thank you.
Unless Natalie, you have anything else? I think that's it. Just the gist of the meeting.
I do not. You covered it all great.
Great. Any other liaison reports? All right. Hearing none, then we'll move on to the budgets. First up, we have the Council on Aging. Let me get their budget up here. All right, for some reason, my computer is refusing to open the budget for me.
Then it's an automatic pass, I guess.
Yeah. Why are you? Okay, there we go. All right, something's happening. Something's happening. All right. Wait. Why did it open Elder House? Sorry. I'm really sorry. Everybody bear with me here. Wow, this, all right, I gotta find a different way to open up this file here. It literally just that one file, it's choosing not to open for me. All right, let's see here.
Is the budget too big to open? Or?
No, it's, I don't know. I just had to go back into my email and open it that way. Just, I don't know if the file just got copied in the wrong way and got corrupted, but here we have it. All right, sorry, go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, so I'm Sue Kelleher. I'm the director of the COA, and Jerry Hahn's also on the call, and she's the board treasurer. So our budget has basically stayed the same. We did try to decrease some of the expenses. So first on the salaries, which does not show, we had the increase that was put in by the town, and then we also cover part of our assistant director position through our lifetime learning revolving account, and our elder advocate, we cover part of that position through the formula grant, which is a grant that we get from the state every year based on the number of elders in the town. So that's almost, we cover almost $11,000. It's $10,500 that we cover in additional to the salaries because of the rates that people were, when we hired the elder advocate last year, we weren't competitive, so we had to dip into the formula grant. And then lifetime learning is covered by we cover a portion of that through the assistant director because it takes a time to manage that program. So salaries are pretty straightforward. And then when we looked at our expenses and you asked us to do level funding, we moved some of the portions of the categories we changed. And I guess the biggest changes in space rental. We went up to from $2,500 to $5,000. And the reason for this is, as you know, we don't have a permanent space or a space to hold our programs. And we use Pilgrim Church for our senior cafes, which we hold 33 of them out of the 52 weeks, where we serve lunch and provide a program, educational or entertainment to those people that attend that program every week. And then we use the Pilgrim Church's ovens and lights and dishwashers and facilities and heat. So we felt like we were giving them $1,000 that we really needed to increase that to $3,000. And then the other remaining money, the $2,000, would be split among the other churches, which we use also for programs, which include the UU Church, St. Teresa's, we use Unity Farm, and also the community center. So that line item had gone up. The other one, our drop-in support, we are hoping to increase our programs this year, which is why we increased that line item. And last year we had high hopes to do a lot more programs, but hence COVID prevented that. So we also had received a grant from Metro West Health Foundation for our men's group that we hold monthly. And that grant just ran out. So that would be covered under the outreach category. And our drop-in support is our weekly food for the senior cafe, and then covers part of the programming. And then the other piece of it is our other bigger item is transportation. So in the beginning of COVID, I received a grant for over $11,000 that covered all transportation costs, medical, grocery. That was in response to the people getting out and getting to locations. They did vaccines and all of that. That grant, we had to give back some of the money because it wasn't used in the time frame that was designated. I had then received an additional $3,600, which is almost exhausted. I have about $200 left, but that grant has been also covered transportation. So for the past year and a half, we haven't had to dig into our transportation, which we expect will go back up because we run about $400 to $500 a month in providing transportation for people. So those are the major line items that have changed. And do you have any questions or comments or?
So I have one comment on this space rental, they all require food delivery type of equipment and services, so that if some new space was brought online, and I won't mention what new space could be brought online that may not have the food service, would you be able to use that common community space for space rental?
So yes, we
It's
do
a
hold-
library. It's a library. If the library comes online, can you shift some of those things to the library?
Yeah, some of them, I think. So the programs that we hold, besides the food program, we do a memory cafe, we do book clubs, we do coffees and conversation and lifetime learning. So yes, we definitely could use the library. It will just, depend on their availability and access to those rooms. So it could change in the future, but right now we don't really have that option. So we have to use other spaces and.
No, absolutely. But I know from experience, during the day, the old library had plenty of room. And I assume the new library.
Yeah, we would, I mean, we do a lot of some of our lifetime learning programs that we do at Town Hall. Obviously, we don't pay Town Hall to do them, so I would assume that those definitely would be moved to the library. But some of the, and I don't know what the room capacity or what the room layout is for the new library, because came long after that. So we tend to hold our smaller programs in the churches besides the senior cafe.
Well, I know Deb and Heidi would give up their office at Town Hall for you to.
And we also do, exercise programs. We've been doing them on Zoom, but if we have a one-off exercise program, we also need a bigger room to utilize.
Thank you.
I have a few questions, and I apologize. I've been a bit distracted in my room because my son was going to bed. So if you covered some of these things, I apologize. And I want to preface by saying that this budget looks great. The fact that your expenses are down 10% and your overall department is barely 1% up is fantastic. But I am going to ask you about some of these things, and I just want to preface by saying that, this year especially, my goal is to really go line by line on everybody's budgets, and I'm not picking on you. And, hopefully everybody realizes or gets the sense that when you come to advisory with needs for increases in budgets and you can explain them, that we're pretty understanding and, open to all of the increases that you need. But on the flip side, I think when we see things that we're like, hey, do you really need all this money? Then we may ask you if you can reduce some of these.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of the things, I'm just going down line by line. Actually, this is in the reverse. Printing and mailing, I see that you always budget 0, and that year to date you've actually used $340. Is that should you actually have an amount in the budget for that one?
We should, because we're hoping to do some, so the printing usually covers a portion of the link, which is actually, we shifted to the formula grant, but we also wanted to put together some resources for town people that are looking for assistance, and also to do welcome packets to people that we go to visit. So printing will increase. We also do some, when we do.
There is a line item specifically for printing, farther down on the budget.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I see. So then does that mean that the printing and mailing account line is actually redundant?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So then do you think, Deb, would it make sense if we were to eliminate that and then
That would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that, no problem.
All right. So there's no need for both of those lines, right? Printing and mailing and printing. Okay, I see that. Okay.
It would just be moved into the other.
Okay, great.
Part.
Oh, okay. All right, and then let's see here. Transportation you covered. Postage, let's see, drop-ins for bus tours. Exercise program you dropped from 6,000 to 0.
Yeah, so when I came on board, I worked closely with Sherborn Rec to work as in partnership. So we have worked really hard in getting the adult fitness programs under the umbrella of Sherborn Rec. So last year, COA covered a lot of the instructor fees, but we've shifted everything to Sherborn Rec. So they were actually paying the expenses for the exercise classes, and we just promote them. They run the classes for us. So we thought that we could give up that money and shift it to recreation budget for them to do some more exercise programs than us. And then we also can cover some of the one-off programs that we do under our formula grant, or a grant that we could go after money for specialty programs like a Walk with Ease or a Matter of Balance, which would be covered under grants. So we figured we could forfeit that.
Okay. And did you confirm with Rec that they're okay with doing that, continuing to cover the those programs out of their presumably out of their revolving fund, right?
Yeah. So yeah, they actually, so after we did that, our new assistant director is the former Sherborn Rec director. So we are now, they didn't really want to take it over again right now because they're replacing Christina. So we're managing the program, but the program right now is making money, so we can cover the expenses through the fees that we charge it for the programs and cover our instructor fees. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, there was a time that in the past 2 years, Recreation has been collecting all the fees for the classes and actually making the payments to the instructors. And prior to that, we weren't charging very much for each class, and we've adjusted some costs per class, like the yoga class costs more than the cardio class. And the classes now are breaking even. We're not losing money like we used to in the past. So, and many of them have continued to run virtually, which has actually been a boon because we've been able to bring in non-residents as well as residents. And you don't have to worry about bad weather. People who are not going to get out in their car to come to a class, they're always there. And so they've become much, I don't want to say profitable, but we're covering our costs. So we just don't need that money anymore.
Okay. Let's see, the next thing I noticed was outreach program development. You're budgeting 2,500 again, but just looking at your trend, it's significantly lower.
So, so like I said, so if you remember, I came in October of 2019. So there had been no programs and no real outreach for a while because there was a lack of staff. And then in March, we had COVID. We also had lost an elder advocate at the time. So we're fully staffed, and our outreach and program development will be used for new programs that once, this crazy situation is over, we'll be able to fund some new programs that we had planned on in 2019 that never came to fruition. We also had funded men's group that meets monthly and is very successful. We have about 25 guys that meet once a month at a restaurant and have a men's group, and that was funded under a grant that we had received, and that funding has run out. So this outreach program development will cover that program as well. So that's why we haven't really spent any money, because we haven't had any programs, but we do anticipate to increase our programs this year.
Okay. And then the supplies and materials line, again, it's similar to printing. It's a zero budget this year and next year, but you have actually spent $347 out of it. Should that actually be shifted into a different line also somewhere?
It should be shifted into office supplies.
Yeah.
Office supply. Okay, great. All right.
Susan and Jerry, you guys touched upon a insightful comment where your reach and expanse during COVID has increased, lowering costs while charging the same, thus increasing the return on investment. And if it can continue beyond a pandemic, where your reach is beyond the town borders of Sherborn, to provide programs and activities that can be done virtually, I would encourage that for just the sake of the department and the individuals that benefit from that.
Yeah, we our drawing class has 8 participants, and 6 of them are from out of town, 1 in California. So that's the good thing about being virtual. However, a lot of people, I think, for the drawing class, it's great. And for exercise, it's great, but not a lot of people are zoomed out. So you have to sort of balance it. And then a lot of our programs, we don't charge. So it just depends on what it is that we're offering, but we definitely would love to have more people from out of town come to our programs.
Absolutely. Those where you can maximize from the remoteness, by all means do, because of the benefit, all around benefit.
Well, we've done quite a bit of lifetime learning classes. Traditionally, even in person, would pull from all the surrounding communities because they were just, people liked them. So we often got revenue from out of town.
Great. Well, that's all the questions I have. Anyone else from advisory have any more questions?
Just a quick clarification. If let's see, which line item was it? The budget for the exercise program is shifting to the recreation. Then, in effect, if we're going to see that amount over there in recreation, then here expenses are not really 10% down, right? They're all like maybe 5% up this year. Is that correct?
I don't think that you're going to see that amount from
Right.
recreation. It's my understanding that they are not going to add that amount to their budget because, as we said, prior to, this partnership with Rec, we weren't covering our instructor fees and the cost to, for space. But since then, we've added classes, we've shifted some costs, we've charged a little bit more for some classes, and we are breaking even. So I don't think you're going to see that figure on the Rec budget. It's my understanding, right? Correct, Sue?
Yeah, that was, when we did the budget, that was our thought to hand it to Rec. It wasn't it was up to recreation whether or not they were going to pursue that and put it in their budget, but we were willing to take it out of our budget.
It's really an accounting question, which I hope Deb can weigh in. Are the funds, the revenue and the expenses matched between departments?
Well, we've seen the rec budget, and the rec budget essentially just had one item, which was their new proposal for contract maintenance of the fields, which was $135,000, and that was their entire budget. So that's why I'm pretty sure that they are covering it in their revolving fund, which, obviously does not come out of our general fund. So this would be effectively a $6,000 decrease in the omnibus.
Right, but Peter, was your question whether like when people pay for the exercise class, is it getting coded to like the recreation department instead of the council on aging department?
Yes, it was a very technical coding question.
Yes, so when they were covering all the expenses, everything went through rec. And at the beginning of the partnership, we tried to figure out the best way to pay for things. So COA had paid for it out of last year's budget. But then when we shifted everything, we just gave it to rec so it was not muddied up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? All right. Hearing nothing else, I think we're done with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
All right, let's see here. Next, we have elder housing. Hopefully I can get this budget on screen. Maybe not. All right, let's see here. All righty, here we go. All right, so Kitty, you're muted right now, Kitty.
All right, I got the video on, but not the mute.
No worries.
I only see 2 members of our committee on the participants list. And if that Joe is Joe Meany, grateful to have him on board, but he is not a member of the committee. So I don't have to call anything to order.
Great.
And I'm going to turn over the presentation of the budget to Steve Petty. And Joe, I'm sure, will be assisting him. And as far as this first page, I believe this is looking at the balance of the revolving fund.
Yes, and I believe I have the Woodhaven budget as a separate separate sheet, so
Okay.
we can go whichever order you want.
I'm just delighted to see that 538 there. I think we just go to the budget.
Yeah, do the budget, please.
All right. Let's see here. Well, really, my computer is very angry with me this evening. All right. Here's the budget. So go ahead and let me know if you want me to scroll up or down on it.
Yeah, I think what I would prefer, the major, we've had a few increases. Our landscape maintenance has increased just because we're taking much better care of the landscape than we used to. The major increase this year is under repair and replacement. You can see it in red, window warrant article. Okay. And we're going to be looking for, we're anticipating up to $300,000 to replace all of the windows at Woodhaven. And we have an estimate right now of debt service for that of $30,300. that's really been our major increase for our budget this year. So if you want to look through and ask questions, we can do that. I think that would be the simplest thing rather than I just walk through item by item.
Okay.
Steve, the payback on those window replacements in terms of increased rent or savings to fuel and energy, do you have that idea? An idea of what that would be?
I don't have a real number. It's obviously going to save us a lot of energy. The windows that are in there are metal frame windows. They are insulated glass. It's 45-year-old insulated glass. A lot of them have failed. Most of them, not most, but an awful lot of them don't slide open anymore. New ones will be all clad frames, and they will be casement windows, which are far more energy efficient than the sliding window. So there will be an energy saving. We have electric heat, so it'll make a difference. I don't have a number for it though, but there will be a savings. We are anticipating that this number, we are within our budget this year for rent, so we will be covering it, and we will be having a rent increase again this year, I'm sure. So we should be well within those numbers.
And asked a different way, and you may not know the exact number, but to replace a window, if a stone was thrown through it or it needed replacement, versus the cost times the cost of replacing all windows, so the single versus all, there's a savings in volume. Do you have that number? Like if you had to replace one window, it's $1,000. If you replace 300 windows, it's only 200,000.
I don't have that number.
Okay.
Quite frankly, if a window were broken, we would replace the glass. We would not replace the entire unit. I don't think any unit has been replaced as a whole unit since the building was put up in the early 80s. So this is a different approach. I would be very willing to say that there is a definite savings by doing everything at once. They would be replaced unit by unit, but it would be a significant savings in doing all of the windows at one time as opposed to one window at a time.
And does the replacement, not to hog the discussion, because I know there's many other interesting questions. Aside from the window replacement, is there also ancillary insulation? Because usually old windows 30, 40 years ago, you never put fiberglass around the window. You just kind of put them in and nailed them in. Is there additional weatherproofing and insulation that goes with these replacement windows?
There is. As part of the installation, they would be putting an expandable foam insulation around the unit once it's in place, because obviously the unit has to be built a little bit smaller than the frame opening. So they set it in place, fasten it, and then they spray foam around that. So there really is better insulation once the project is done, yes.
Thank you.
Have you explored any sort of rebates or anything, or potential grants? Have you coordinated with like the sustainability coordinator to figure out if there's any way we can drive down some of these costs?
I've asked a couple of folks, and nobody seems to be aware of a grant that would be available for something like this, but we are certainly open to it if anyone has an idea. We'll take any money we can get. I did speak with Gino Carlucci briefly to see if he was aware of anything, and he said he was not aware of something regarding a replacement of window situation.
And Steve Lee had a question, just what, do you know, what's the total number of windows that's being replaced for the amount of the request?
I believe it's 94. I don't have those notes right in front of us, 94 or 95.
All right, and you said that that is going to be its own separate warrant article, right?
Correct.
All right.
Or Steve, is this something would be appropriate to be under a capital budget expenditure and we would pay that portion of the bond? This is something
That's
we
correct.
have.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that was my assumption, that it would be a warrant article within the capital improvement program, right?
Okay, we didn't know how you wanted to handle it. That's why.
Yeah, because I think that essentially what you're asking is that the town borrow the money and then your revolving fund would service the debt. But
That's
essentially, yeah. So I
Right.
think, and Heidi could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the appropriate way to handle that would be to have it as a capital request, because it is the town that's actually doing the borrowing on it. But is that right, Heidi?
Well, that's how they handled the turf field last year, that it was a separate warrant article, even though it was going to be, the town was going to borrow and they were going to pay back. So
Oh yeah. So that was a separate article, wasn't it?
And
yeah, so that's why I kind of think it's almost a town council question,
Yeah.
more so than us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's a capital request in a warrant article.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the select board will sort out the proper legal way to handle that on the warrant. But so long as we understand that essentially the expectation is that the town is going to do the borrowing and then Elder Housing Revolving Fund will service the debt. I think that's mostly what advisory cares about, I think.
And I have a follow-up question, if I may. The water supply has been addressed with the funds made available to both Woodhaven and both communities that access Leland Farm. Thank you.
But Peter, that's under the control of Sean Colleen. He's carrying that project.
Okay, but in your mind, it's addressed. It's not an additional cost that you would have to bear in terms of.
If there were additional expenses, that would be part of the rent structure, I believe.
Okay.
And I do, yeah, if I may, Kitty, I think the cost of combining the two systems is being carried by the town or the DPW. That's not part of our budget. Once the two housing areas are combined with the water system, the billing of the water treatment plant, which is right now Elder Housing's, will be shared, and therefore the cost in our budget to maintain the water treatment plant will probably reduce a little bit. Not very much, but it will probably drop off a little bit.
Okay, it was my understanding that there was a beneficial solution to both parties and that the quality of water would improve with that solution.
I think that's correct. And because Woodhaven has a water treatment system in place, we will be able to improve that and piggyback both of the areas off that system, as opposed to improving elderly housings and putting in a new one for Leland Farm.
Great, thank you for connecting those dots for me.
All right, any other questions about either the Woodhaven budget or the Elder Housing Revolving Fund as a whole?
My only question on the revolving fund, and I think I may know the answer, but I just want to confirm. The run rate is obviously a lot higher than would be expected this year, but I think you had several repairs you were doing, and I'm assuming it's just that you've done most of those in the first half of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, we replaced the roof this year for $100,000, and that's been paid for. So we've expended a very large percentage of the budget, but a lot of it came out of the roof, or the roof has caused a lot of that percentage, correct?
And then for COVID, we've put in an ERV system in the community room to circulate the air in a better fashion. And that we've paid for. And we also had to upgrade or replace all the emergency pendants that everyone wears to notify the public safety area if they have a problem. And we've paid for that in full this year. And that was expensive, but that's hopefully we won't be seeing those expenses going forward.
Kitty, make sure those filters are MERV 13. I did this for a few hospitals. That filters out the COVID virus, MERV 13 versus higher, MERV. And I have no idea how they came up with that, but those HVAC people know that.
I'm sure that Steve has written that down already. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
A quick question, please. Is there electrical in the budget? You
Yes.
mentioned the heat is electric. I
Yes,
probably
it's
missed
actually
that.
the very first, right at the top of the budget. $21,000. It's the first item on the budget.
Okay, got it.
And for background information, that is for the public areas of the buildings, and the residents pay their own electrical bill. They all have their own meters.
Got it.
And we've
Okay.
replaced all, what are the new light bulbs they call it? We had something, it was a $14,000 bill, but because of some grant through Eversource, we only paid, I think it was about $2,500. I don't have the minutes in front of me. So we were able to take advantage of that.
Interesting, LED lights. So the common area maintenance charges are not spread amongst the individual tenants, but absorbed by this budget?
Yes, but they're paying for it in their rent. That's
Okay,
covering
so
it.
thank you.
Yes. They're paying, yes.
Okay.
And just a quick follow-up on the heat. What is the heat? Is that baseboard or what is the
Electric
electrical?
It's
Electric baseboard?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. And this is obviously something the tenants are paying for, right? But you know, there's been, and I don't know if this also applies to larger buildings, but even for electric heat, the mini splits are awesome. And the rebates were great, actually, especially on larger units. So again, I don't know how that applies to a complex like this, but
Well, it's worth looking into. Thank you. I mean, that is worth looking into.
Great. Any other questions or comments from advisory?
Just a quick comment that all your work over the years I've been on advisory has definitely benefited those seniors that are residents to have quality living in our community. And so thank you. I know you get paid as much as we do. And it's a definite community asset. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank
We
you for your
appreciate
time.
that.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. A lot of Steves on this call. All right, let's see here. Next up, we have Town Forest. Dave Colleen is here. Bring up. Oh, please work, silly computer. No.
Dave, well, let's work. How did the clear cutting go from 3 years ago? I remember we gave 30,000 to clear cut, like deforest, the Amazon or something in Sherborn, and how'd that go?
That's, they were dead and dying red pines. And we took them down, and it cost Town Forest money to take them out. And some of my discussions tonight will be about starting a nursery in that area, clearing it up a little bit. And so that's part of our wish list for our budget.
All right, I believe I've got you on screen here now, Dave. And yeah, if you want to just give us a rundown of your activities sort of last year and anticipated.
We've been a little slow through COVID afterwards, and we've been working on getting the parking lot set right there on North Main Street, which was part of that red pine cutting area. So that's paperwork for that is coming out of the state pretty soon. And then we actually have 3 parking lots that we're going to be working on hopefully this year. We have one on Hunting Lane and possibly one on Prospect Street. And like I said, the nursery stock that we want to purchase, a couple of different types of trees. Some of them will be staying there, and some of them will be planted on the edge of the road, shade trees, replacement shade trees. We have to work on a new forestry plan because the one we have is 9 years old. We have a plan of working on repairing the fire roads, which is ongoing. We have quite a number of miles of roads. And we have a plan up on our cutting. This money that we're talking about in this budget, it's not tax money. This is money that the wood crew makes selling firewood. So one of the things that we need up that area is like a tractor barn, because we're starting to get some splitters and a couple of pieces of equipment, and we need to keep it inside. So, you know, we're working on all those things, and you know, we have a lot of things we want to do, and we're starting pretty soon, as soon as the weather gets better.
So do you know how much do you anticipate needing to spend in fiscal 23 out of the revolving fund? Just because I think you're set at 35,000 right now, but I think, you know, just looking at your activities over the past couple of years, you haven't needed that much, but it sounds like you maybe have some projects that you've got lined up.
Yeah, it's I have big dreams. So I'm I haven't even got all the estimates in yet, and I have no idea what the barn is going to cost us. We're hoping for a lot of donations and help from guys, but I know that if I started all these things that are on the list, the 26 would be gone. So, and I tend to try to keep money in there so that, like I said, we make this money selling firewood, and when we need money to pay, you know, these different groups that work for us, we can't go to the town. You know, we want to work on it right now. So it's, you know, it's tough to go to town meeting now and say, I need to get the money going.
Dave, can you harvest all of that wood revenue in the corner of the cemetery? That are trees that are age seasoned. They're big, so they require a lot of work to make into firewood. But there seems to be a lot of revenue there every time I go by there.
Right. We have quite a bit of wood on the top of the hill where the guys have their processing area. Come, from the town forest, from trustees of the reservation. Sean drops wood in from, some of the areas when the town does cutting. So, if we need that, we could possibly go get that.
Just, and this is a naive question, if the demand is there, or are you meeting demand with the wood that you have, and that the trees you harvest from the town forest meet the demand, but if the demand exceeds the supply, wouldn't you be chipping away at the cemetery stockpile, Sean's stockpile?
Absolutely, if we need it. If we run short of, if we have on top of the tower area, we would bring in whatever we need.
So you're meeting demand. You're fulfilling everyone's order who needs wood, and with the lumber that comes out of, or the kindling firewood that comes out of the town forest now.
Right. Right. We take whatever we need. And as of right now, we have the guys have a list of deliveries that they go out to deliver constantly, as long as there's no snow.
And your crew delivers too?
Yes.
Your members deliver too?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's part of the fee for delivery, and they don't stack it, they just deliver it.
Yep.
Yeah, I buy my wood from the town forest.
Yeah.
All right, any other?
More.
Any more questions for Dave? All right, thanks, Dave. Just stay in contact with Deb Seifring, just to make sure that the spend limit for the Town Forest Revolving Fund is set at the appropriate level of what you think you're going to need.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you all.
All right, thank you, Dave. All righty. Now we've got conservation. Right now, do I have the correct one? No, yeah, this is the same one. All right. And because my wife is on the Conservation Commission, I am going to abstain from any discussion on this, but obviously I'm going to stay here for it. I'm going to put your budget on screen here. And Neil or Kelly, you can feel free to tell me to move things around, switch tabs, or whatever you need.
Sure. Neil, do you want to set it off?
Sure. I figured I'd just kind of give you a brief overview of our budget and why it is what it is. So as you can see in the budget, the total expenses for the Conservation Commission have been kept level funded as was requested. And on the salary side, we have just a cost of living increase for the administrative assistant, but you can obviously see there's a big increase in the conservation agent salary, and that is because we have hired a conservation agent at 35 hours a week, up to 35 hours a week. And if you'd like, what I'd like to do is just sort of walk you through a little bit of the rationale of how we ended up here and why we've added it to our budget for FY23. So basically, as I think we sent this in with our sort of just the rationale for what we were doing, but you know, the Conservation Commission has two main charges. One is wetlands protection and regulation. The other is land management. And really on both fronts in the last fiscal year, we've had, in terms of wetlands protection, a lot more applications for NOIs and requests for determination and administrative approvals. And it's just there's been just a big increase in people's you know, activity at home and things that need regulating from a jurisdictional impacts perspective for the Conservation Commission. And then in terms of land management, there's just been, we have a fair bit of acreage, about 800 acres of conservation land. And with the pandemic, we saw a big increase in people's use of that land, which is fantastic. We're happy to have people out and enjoying what we see as sort of real gems in our town, but obviously it puts a lot of pressure on those lands as well. We've seen furniture dumped and everything else. And so as part of a separate effort last year, Gene Bednar had done some research into what people were doing in terms of employing folks for land management and for just Conservation Commission just overall. And what we found in the towns that she looked at was that we were just sort of generally out of keeping in terms of the staffing that we had to cover the amount of conservation land, the amount of permitting we had. And so we started to talk about this, and this was also in the midst of the fact that in 2021, we went 10 months without a full-time agent, and we spread that sort of the responsibilities around to Elizabeth Larissy, our administrative assistant, who did yeoman's work. And then we had a consultant come in, giving us a very low discounted rate, not her consulting rate, to do some of the work, and Gene Bednar volunteering about 10 hours a week to try to cover it. And what we sort of drew as a conclusion out of that was that there were two problems. One is, at a 19-hour position, which is what the agent was, we couldn't attract the kind of quality candidates that we thought could do a really good job with it. When we advertised the 19 hours, we had very little interest. We ended up hiring somebody into that job. And then this led to the second conclusion, because after 4 weeks, he quit. And one of the bits of his feedback was that it was just too much work for somebody to handle in 19 hours. So back in the fall, we went to the select board, talked to them about conceptually expanding the role to 35 hours from 19 hours with benefits. And they directed us, well, can you go to personnel board and get their approval first? So we did that actually, this is not in the fall, it was earlier than that, it was in the spring. Because in the summer, we went to personnel board, we got their approval to change the position to a regular part-time position, benefited up to 35 hours a week. We went back and advertised the position at 35 hours a week that way, and we got quite a few applicants. And we ended up with someone who, although they didn't have agent experience, they had a master's degree and a lot of really relevant stuff. And that's Anna Meyer, who is our current agent. And she is busy climbing the learning curve and doing wonderfully, because it's a baptism by fire for sure. So we're just at a point now, as we do budgeting for next year, where we'd like to add the 35-hour position and fund it. And that's what we're here tonight to talk to you about mostly.
Neil, my first question, and let me put my video on so you can see me, is that new position, can the return on investment, can they increase conservation land, or is it just maintenance of the same land that we have? And that's kind of a naive question.
Well, so you're saying, well, conservation land is something where people who privately hold land that might be of interest for conservation reasons, they offer to the town to sell it. And then usually what happens is the Conservation Commission is asked if it's land that's going to be, have good conservation value. We give that feedback to the select board, and the select board makes a decision. And then obviously if it's bought for, as conservation land, then it comes under us in terms of land management. But there's nothing that the agent position does directly in terms of increasing or decreasing actual acreage or parcels.
Can they?
In what sense? Sorry.
However you inspire people to donate their land to conservation for the town of Sherborn. And again, I could write up a little, narrative on how if you had 100 acres that you wanted to sell to a developer or to the town, again, I'd like to see conservation land expand because that's for the good of the town. And we're seeing the budget expand for that position. And if that position can be tied to increase to conservation land somehow, and maybe it's just coaching or from yourself or others that have had conservation conversion experience, that would be beneficial.
Okay, let me respond to that a little bit because I think there's sort of a couple of elements working in what you're saying. So what I would say is that certainly the agent can put, if expansion of conservation land becomes a town priority, there's no question that an agent that's got 35 hours a week to use is going to be more able to step in and educate and, like you said, and sort of espouse for the expansion of conservation land. I will also tell you, though, that there is often a conflict that arises when somebody does want to donate conservation land, because usually what that means is it's coming off the tax rolls. And since we're usually tax strapped, some folks from a fiscal perspective don't want that to occur. And I mean, the Conservation Commission doesn't necessarily, well, not necessarily, we don't factor that in the financial piece. We just try to assess for conservation value. And so if we see a parcel or offered a parcel, we do sort of render an opinion, but we do not go out and try and educate in advance. Partly, I think it's because it's sort of even though for us it's not a political thing, it can become one, where differences in policy ideas kind of butt heads, and we try our best to sort of stay out of that kind of stuff. But I mean, look, I think if you're going to talk to the Conservation Commission, would they like to have more conservation land? Of course, because we see the value in it. That's why we volunteer doing what we do.
It's a tricky knife edge to walk. Yes. It is.
Hey, Neil, Mark Albers here. I don't know how long Anna Meyer has been on the job. I don't think it's been very long, but in her or your collective experience so far, is 35 hours the right amount of hours?
What I would say is this: she's not sitting around. So, if anything, she could probably use more hours. I'm not saying she has said anything or would want it, but she is hopping. She's got a lot on her plate. She's not only learning, but just between permitting and land management. And I mean, I always think that at some point things will die down in terms of, controversial projects or big projects or any of those kinds of things, but it doesn't really seem to be occurring. So, so she's very busy. And so I think, someday could I envision there being more staff there? Absolutely. But I think right now the 35 hours is certainly a welcome expansion, and she's using up every bit of it.
Has the volume just ramped up over time? Is this like we blame everything on COVID? Is this a COVID thing too, where people are just concentrating more on this type of activity? And I guess then, do you think that, would you surmise that eventually it will go back down?
There's no question there's a pandemic element to it, because, in my day job, I see this because I'm in construction. And so there's just, people are doing more things with their houses, doing more things with their homes, adding a wing, adding a bedroom, whatever it is, or just, hey, I'm going to put a shed in, or, hey, those trees are really blocking the sun, let me cut those down. Like that kind of stuff just happens a lot more. And just like the pressure on conservation land, people just are getting out onto our public lands more. And so if the pandemic were to completely disappear tomorrow, do I think that would sort of go in the other direction? Probably to some extent. But I don't know. I really can't imagine it would go all the way back to kind of what it was before. And I would also say that the trend that we've seen in terms of applications is it's pre-pandemic that it had started to grow. So I think some of it's just, there's just development that goes on in Sherborn, more houses coming in, more activity. So I think it's a combination of factors.
Slightly tangential, do you guys determine what your fees are for each of these applications?
Kelly? This is a good question for him.
I guess my question is just like, has there been any discussion about
Yes,
those fees being raised to match some of the need?
the fees have been set in our regulations for quite a long time. They have changed occasionally, but we did a review of the fees, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it must have been, determined they were fairly accurate in terms of the comparing the fee, the level of effort. Now, remember, quite a bit of the permitting work we do does not pay a fee. It's DPW has to come before us, other town agencies come before us, for which there can't be a fee. And our fees, there are some differences between other towns around, but they're fairly comparable.
Got it. Thanks, Kelly. Anyone else from advisory have questions?
I do. Neil or Kelly, does this position of the agent work, I'm sure collaboratively, but integrally into the planning and town function so that, a follow-up on my other question is, maybe if it's outside the scope of the agent to do something with a potential property, they could bird dog it for another town agency to say, hey, let's do something with this so that we maintain the rural atmosphere of Sherborn.
Let me run with that just a little bit.
Please.
It was clearly identified in the new town master plan a couple of years ago that our vistas and conservation property are one of the great assets of Sherborn. A lot of people move here because of that. It's a high priority for the town to maintain that and increase it in some places. But the Conservation Commission has never really had that much of a role in new lands, but we do have a land acquisition committee in Sherborn, which has done a lot of work over the past years in inventorying and prioritizing projects. And the Sherborn Rural Land Foundation, led by George Fisk, has been responsible for quite a few of the major acquisitions over the past decades. The protection of conservation land, you could say, is deeply integrated into town government and the private agencies. We'd like to do more in the commission, but it's being pretty well taken care of.
Thank you. I'd like every new resident to receive that master plan that was published a few years ago, just so that they know what they bought into. But it's to everyone's benefit, as we all know, and conservation is an important part.
Yeah, I ask, going from 19 hours to 35 hours, is this going from a non-benefited to a benefited position?
Yes.
Yeah, so there is, do you have a quantification of that additional cost associated with that?
Kelly, do you want to answer that?
I think this came up at the selectmen's meeting last week, and somebody came up with 20 or 30%, I'm pretty sure, of the salary that would have to go. It's not in the Conservation Commission budget. It's in an insurance line that's different from ours. But the additional salary, I gather the rule of thumb was something like 20 or 30% is going to go into the increase in insurance.
I'll add to that. I believe all new positions, the fringe benefit, which is that 20 to 30%, which is very rich, goes onto the town. And Deb, you may be able to help me with the benefits of insurance, life insurance, 401k, all of those matching costs or additional employer costs are borne by the town versus the department.
That is correct. It goes into the health and benefits and employee benefits. And it's really hard to quantify because you really don't know if the person is taking insurance or not, or if they're taking single or family. You know, you can't really quantify those kind of things. You know, they do end up getting vacation, which, you know, is, and paid holidays and things like that. But it's 20 to 30% of their salary is a reasonable amount, but there's really no specific line item that you're going to see it in the budget.
Right. The fixed piece, holidays, vacation, you estimate, and then the variable piece, whether they need insurance or life insurance or whatever benefit that they offer, is the questionable piece. But I think that flows through the budget for all new hires, wouldn't it? Deb?
I'm sorry, say, what was the question? It goes through employee benefits. Yes, through the line item.
Right. So if you know you had 100 FTEs last year and 105 FTEs this year, you would say those 5 FTEs at their rate plus 20% would be borne by the town's benefit budget, because they would have holidays, they would have vacation, they would have a portion of benefits.
Agreed.
Okay. So Jane, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to know really that, you know, the expense is greater than what is reflected in the budget per se. Also, I'm wondering if you can help us understand what is not getting done now at 19 hours that would get done at 35 hours, or, you know, vice versa. You know, what happens, I guess, just, you know, what happens if it's 19 hours and not 35 hours? Are things just getting processed more slowly? Is certain work not being done? What is actually going on in those extra hours?
So I think there's a range of impacts that the 19 hours has versus 35. I think one is, like I said, the previous agent burned out after 4 weeks and said, there's just no way that anybody could do this work in this period of time. So the two main pieces of work are land management, so conservation land and working with, you know, other town bodies, doing any kind of maintenance, arranging for volunteers, any of that kind of stuff. So just generally, in the past, what we've ended up doing is trying to use volunteers, but, you know, it's always the same 7 people. And at some point they can't do it anymore. And so there's no one else to do it. The agent can't do it because he or she does not have the time. And then on the regulation side, you have somebody who's, you know, maybe they're hitting the regulatory deadlines that we have, 21 days to produce a draft of an order of conditions or anything like that. But we have these deadlines. And if you have this influx, the work itself gets sloppier. You know, people are cutting corners, or they're doing the bare minimum of what they can do. So, and to me, that always sort of raises the specter of any kind of legal thing. What if I make a mistake, you know, the agent makes a mistake in a document because they're just moving too fast, or we're sort of, the other thing that happens is it ends up sort of overflowing into the Conservation Commission members themselves. And I think, you know, sort of Jean Bednar is probably my big example, where she's doing, you know, she was doing a lot of the work of the agent, even when we had the agent before the one that quit in the spring. So last in 2020, when we had our 19-hour agent, and Jean was just, you know, volunteering her time and not being compensated for it. And it's not particularly fair. So I would just say across the board, sort of the quality of the work suffers, and there are just things that we're not able to get to that we see as basic to running the commission.
Can you give an example of what some of those things are?
In terms of
what you wouldn't get to if you didn't have the 35 hours?
Invasives management in Hidden Meadow, or doing a, you know, sort of an educational thing for folks in the town about spring peepers. And so those would be 2 examples of things that wouldn't get done in conservation, you know. Or, I mean, we've had these sort of, in the last couple of years, we've had these inventories done for our sort of biggest, most popular parcels. And one thing that wouldn't get done is all the management recommendations they made in order to make them as good as they can be for conservation and passive recreation use, like implementing any of that kind of stuff, developing management plans. None of that stuff is going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Who manages this position, Neil?
You mean who does the agent report to?
Yes.
She reports to me.
And so during the prior person who was working 19 hours, did she ever say, I'm overwhelmed, this is too much, or did she just quit?
Well, I think for, I don't want to comment on anybody's sort of work performance or whatnot, but I would say that she did her best. She did not ask for more hours, but she was running constantly. And I would say, just from my perspective, the quality of the work was not where I thought it should be. She didn't complain, and I can't read her mind, I don't know, but I thought there was a potential that she didn't want more hours. Because we offered, because we recognized that there was a lot of pressure on that position, but she didn't want them. And I like I said, I don't know specifically what was in her mind on that, but I do think that she could have used the hours.
So to Jane's question, it was assumed that more hours were needed versus a higher caliber individual.
More hours, I think, was more important. And I think she was a high quality individual. I do, but I think that I would say that Anna's got more sort of background or education, although I don't know. Again, I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't remember the previous agent's background. So, but what I would say is I think predominantly it was more time.
Anyone else have any questions?
I'll make a comment here. I appreciate the background and information, Neil. Conservation is important to this town and preserving our rural feel. I just, that large of a increase in budget is tough to handle, and there's no way to go half, add a few hours, but not 16. That would be insufficient.
As I said before, I think the 35, she's using every bit of the 35 hours and probably could use more, but I don't see a halfway being possible, partly because this kind of went back to the original rationale, which is we were not attracting quality candidates at something less than approximately full-time. And so to go to a half measure is just going to put more pressure. I mean, we would probably lose the one we have, and it just puts that much more pressure on the agent. And I just don't, where we are as a town, given the importance of our conservation land and just the increase in both regulatory and land management pressure, I just don't see how it could be done. I think we sort of hit, like I said, I'll remind, we went 10 months without an agent, and collectively 3 people were working 50 hours a week on these issues. So 35 hours a week is actually a step down from that, but we do have, the administrative assistant is in there as well. So 35 plus 19 or whatever she's got. So somewhere in the neighborhood of what we were doing with 3 people. And, one of them is a volunteer 10 hours a week, just giving away her time. And the other, instead of charging $75 or $80 an hour, she was charging what the agent would have cost, which was $30 or $31 an hour. I don't see it being possible given the current circumstance.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think you can tell, Neil, by the nature of my questions, that I share Steve's concern about adding this many hours and increasing the budget by this much. It's a tough budget year for us. We've got a lot of inflationary pressures on us, which are increasing the budget. You know, it's just a tough year, and I don't know that this is the year to make this big of an increase.
Neil, is there an agency, Conservation Agent Inc., that we can outsource this to? As opposed to hiring someone, and again, it's a different avenue.
We haven't explored anything like that, but I will also tell you, we did hire somebody already. So we would have to fire that person.
No, they would hire them. It's easier than that. Sorry.
Well, I mean, I don't know that there is. It's not an avenue we explored. I don't know, Kelly, if you know anything about that, but it's not an avenue we explored.
Yeah, privatization is an avenue.
I've never heard of a agency that did that kind of work. I think universally, regardless of the size of staff, it's a dedicated staff to that town, and it would become less and less efficient if that were not the case.
I also think it would be quite a bit more expensive to do it on a consulting basis.
We don't know. It's a guess. But we don't even know if there is one out there.
Yeah, I have never, I mean, I've traveled in this world for quite some time and I've never heard of such a thing, so.
Neil, is an opportunity.
Sure. And look, I will say, I understand the pressures that the budget and things like that. I will also say that I believe that conservation has had very little in terms of, it's had a pretty small budget relative to some other town departments, and our role, you know, our sort of responsibilities assigned in the new master plan. I mean, you can go through the sort of the index and look at all the things that we're expected to do, and I've just seen it firsthand. It's been, I will tell you, it has been grueling for members of the commission to try to backfill on all of the things that we have to do, that we're required to do as a town that has a lot of open space, a lot of conservation land, and a lot of increased activity. I just think that to have a part-time agent in that kind of scenario I just don't think it's realistic anymore, which is why I went in the middle of the year and I went to the select board and said, you know, can we do something about this? And we went to them a few days ago. Conceptually speaking, they're open to this idea. And I would just say, I think this is vitally important for the well-being of the town and the rural open space that it values and that it markets itself with as an attraction.
Any other comments, questions from advisory? Neil, Kelly, thank you for your time. We much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it too.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, last on the agenda, we've got the assessor. We have Wendy and like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Groove Kashal is here. All right, let's see here.
Yes, he is.
I'm gonna get your budget on screen here.
Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, huh?
All righty. And this, I believe this is an updated version that I just got today from Deb, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only
119,
thing,
yeah.
the only thing that changed was I reduced the office supplies from $920 to $600. So that's the only change.
Great. All right, do you want to walk us through this?
Well, do you want to ask me questions about what kind of jumps out at you, or do you want to just go line by line? It's
no,
not
that's like,
that big.
no, it's not that big. I mean, the salaries, I guess, can you just tell us about the permanent part-time position?
Yes, so the permanent part-time position is our administrative assistant, who's been with us for 8 years. And we, the board approved, and myself last year, to increase our hourly rate. And we did that because there were newer employees who had no municipal experience that were coming in and getting paid more than she was, and we didn't think that that was fair. I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure to work with Amy, but she's wonderful and she's an integral part of our office. And she's taken on more responsibilities, and it's well worth the couple $1,000s or more a year. So we could keep her on board with us.
Wendy,
So
that
that's
it
what
didn't
is
come
the
from the
increases.
individual saying I'm underpaid. That just came from our management knowledge of what the next employee hired off the labor market was making.
Well, what I saw as an injustice as far as, again, people with no experience coming in and making more in the same position, I didn't think that that was fair. I had been thinking, because she's does much more than what is on her job description, I approached my board and they all concurred. And I approached the employee, and she said that she saw what I had, she came across information that I had come across, and she was going to approach me anyway. So.
And again, there's on the private side, there's always internal parity issues, and seniorities usually hampered. Yet, if you give someone a 5% increase from where they were, they're delighted because, boy, or 6%, they're delighted. Boy, I got 6% more versus someone's opinion. And I guess it was depending on the opinion versus what the market, which is this individual, would bear.
Well, this is, I mean, obviously I did more research, and the board and I spoke at length about this increase. And it falls within her range. So,
right, which he had left.
You know, it's a
increase?
Potentially.
So, yeah,
I don't know. But you know, it was $1.88 an hour raise for 20 hours a week.
I see.
So $40 a week about.
When you say within her range, Wendy, I assume you mean within the range for the position in the town, in the.
Yes, I spoke with David Williams, and what we increased it to, he said was within the range.
Do you know, did personnel board weigh in on it at all, or was it basically just you and David Williams?
No, it was myself and my board, my elected board, and then we approached David.
Okay.
Yeah, just to chime in a little bit, something similar happened to myself with the payroll girl upstairs. And the personnel board doesn't need to chime in if the pay range is staying in between the range. David had a huge spreadsheet that had like a range of salary, and then within that range, it was like years of experience and how they were performing and everything else like that. And if the pay increase fell within that range, then there was no need for any other approval other than his as a town administrator and human resource manager.
Great.
And again, I had my board's approval because they supervise me.
Great. Any other questions on the salary line before we move to expenses?
Wendy, just a clarification, please. What is that board again?
The Board of Assessors.
Okay, got it.
Yes, thank you.
All right, moving on to expenses. Generally looks good. I have a question about printing and mailing, which is kind of zeros for all the past 3 years, and then budgeted 200, spent 0. Is that actually, should that actually be in a different line?
No, it actually may be a little bit more than 200. I'm not sure, but I want to get door hangers made for when we go out and do inspections. Oftentimes we get a call that, oh, I found a card that you left back in July in my bushes. And so they, and we're not allowed by law to put anything in a mailbox. So I think I'm going to get some door hangers made up. So that's why I kept it in there.
Okay. Yeah, everything else looks pretty logical. I guess dues and subscriptions and memberships, is 550 going to be enough, seeing that you've spent almost twice that already this year?
Yes, because what I'm doing is I'm no longer subscribing to the Marshall and Swift cost manuals. I can get that information through Patriot Property, and that's how we update our cost tables. So it's not necessary, and it was about like a $400 or $500 a year expense that I can find that same information for free. So.
Great.
And I like free.
When did
good.
Consulting services? I believe I know the genesis, but share why that went up over previous year spends.
Sure. So for FY22, that is comprised of $8,000 for the reval, $5,000 for the mandated utility valuation through the state, and then $1,600 was for training through VADAR. At the time that I made the budget last year, we weren't, there was mixed information as to whether or not we would have to pay for additional training. We do not. So I removed the $1,600 and brought it down to the $13,000. So that's $8,000 going towards the reval and $5,000 for our yearly mandate going forward.
And this is a nerdy question, but I'll ask it.
Sure.
The VADAR integration, you input all of the town property valuations into VADAR?
No. Well, no, we just put so through VADAR, I have to create the bill file. I extract it from the Patriot Properties. I create the bill file. And then I go on to go to assist with VADAR, and we process the bill file, and we transfer and extract the information, and we have a data bridge, and we go through that process. And there are a handful of other things that we use it for. So it wasn't clear at that point if that was going to be free training or.
So it's just an accounts receivable. Peter Galatano owes $10 on his property tax, and that's what gets transferred over.
Yes, correct.
And
correct.
that's
That
$10.
goes over, yeah.
That's public information, so that's all I owe this year.
Oh, okay, not a
Oh,
problem.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, but that's helpful.
Okay,
So
all right.
it's just the AR piece and I'm just,
I know.
looking at the funds flow of how you integrate with Vadar. And
Exactly.
so that all
Yes.
flows into Vadar as
Yes.
the accounts receivable.
Yes.
And then when the payments come in, that offsets those tax
Yes.
liabilities.
Yes, and I know that you as advisory and the select board have been looking for, it's not a cost saving measure, but it certainly is an efficiency measure. Amy and I have never had access to the tax bills. So every time we had a question about if a tax bill was paid, can I check the address? We would have to go in and we would get a paper copy of a tax bill. And that also went for, we had an extremely large plastic box that Amy would have to hand file 4,000 excise tax bills in. We no longer have to do that. We have access to all of that information on our database. So I know you want to look for cost saving measures, but it really is much more efficient.
No,
And I
there's
can
a-
go on
yeah.
and see if an exemption is, on there that needs to be on there or anything like that. So it's great.
No, thank you. You answered my question. It's the interface between information systems within the town now into the
Yes.
future, and everything should be consolidated, integrated, so that you don't have to use the plastic box. You can use
Exactly.
whatever electronic digital means. And that's
Absolutely. We're less paper, more send it to me electronically. Absolutely. If it's legal, that's all. So do you have any more questions about the budget, or am I off the hook yet?
I've got nothing else. Anybody else
Okay.
from advisory?
just
All right.
one aside from the utilities.
Yes.
The progress on that, have they paid their bill?
They, as of a few days ago, they have not. They have not, and I have not had time to call other communities and see what's going on in their towns. But with utilities and large payments like that, they generally don't get paid until the very end anyway. So they hold on to it and, release it as long as it's in by the 1st of February. So we'll know by February 2nd.
So February
February
2nd,
3rd.
we'll know whether it's litigation or payment.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I will let you guys know.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. If that's all, and I think we're all set with you guys.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to say hi. So it's nice to see all the faces.
Miss you, Drew.
And it's nice to be able to hang up as I will right now. Thank you for all the hard work you do on behalf of the
Drew,
town.
are you a
Yes.
citizen?
What's that?
Are you a
I
citizen?
am. I'm sorry. Yeah, I joined
Okay.
just in my,
Just
to
wondering.
express my
You
views.
you look familiar.
Okay. Thank you very
No,
much.
no,
Have a good night.
Your hair is a little bit
9:03.
different. I don't know.
That's true. It's been a while. It grew back from my time on the
Yeah.
committee. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. I believe the last thing we have now is the minutes.
Actually, hey, Steve.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I'm not sure if now's the time to bring it up or not. While I was doing some research, that Concom budget is large. I'll send an email with my thoughts on it to the group in a blind CC format.
Okay.
Never mind. I'm all set.
Great. All right. All right. Can everyone see these? And I apologize, I have not read these yet. I guess we'll just all browse through it on screen and everybody chime in with any edits.
have a question, and I apologize because I didn't go back and look at the numbers again, but I don't think the cemetery increased their budget by 7,000. I think it was less than that. Because I had a conversation with Chucky, and when she first told me what their increase was going to be, I don't think it was that high.
No, it's only $3,400.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, my apologies. Not sure where that figure came from. Happy to change it.
All right, we'll change it here. What did you say it was 3,400?
Yes.
All right. All right. Otherwise, that looks okay to me. Anybody else have any other edits? All right. If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 12th, 2022 Advisory Committee meeting as edited on screen?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right. All right. I'll take a roll call vote. Jane?
Aye.
Brendan?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Wasim?
Aye.
Let's see, Natalie?
Aye.
Steve Lady?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye, so those pass unanimously. I believe that is it. So barring any other additional things, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
All right. All right, let's take a roll call. Jane?
Aye.
Brendan? Mark?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Wasim?
Aye.
Nat?
Aye.
And Steve?
Aye.
All right, I'm also an aye, so 9:08 p.m. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. See you next week. Next week's going to be a big one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good.
Aye.
All right, guys, thank you.